You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
Today we have joining us is Scott McMahon. Scott McMahon is the Director of Content Marketing for Film Trooper, but Scott has also worked 20 years professionally in the areas of interactive gaming, film, and TV production. Scott actually worked in a cinematic department for Sony, working in the PlayStation division, and Scott has actually gone on to make his own feature film called The Cube. And today we're going to be talking about how Scott made that movie and also the state of independent film today. Scott, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good, and by the way, that's a great intro. You sound like old, like way pro radio guy. I can't. I guess I can never do an interview like that in my podcast. Like, it's awesome.
I've learned what I've done, Scott, is I just take basically what people have on their website and just like keep most of it, and I sort of add my own spin to it because I realize that's probably the best way to introduce somebody is the way on their website, and
nice,
I don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Hey, can we is this a family friendly podcast, or am I keeping my language under control?
Oh, you can say whatever you want.
Oh, okay, so that basically is all bullshit then, right? No, I'm just kidding. It's like if I'm writing it, it's on my website, then it's got to be bullshit.
Oh man, but yeah, I know what you mean, because when I wrote my bio, I was like, how do I write this? Maybe I should get somebody else. But Scott, you made a transition from working in Sony to working into to making your feature film The Cube. So could you give us a little background on yourself and how you made that transition?
Yeah, so here's a real quick skinny, like if we just met, I'm older. I'm not in my 20s and stuff. I'm in my early 40s, but I don't look it because I'm half Asian. Go figure. And I'm immature, There's a saying, like in business, like you are the sum of the average of the 5 people you hang out with. Well, I work at home quite a bit, so I'm around my 12-year-old daughter and her friends. So I'm essentially a 12-year-old girl. So so my maturity level is very low. But with that said, I went to film school. And I made a bunch of bad films like you're supposed to do. But I made one film that was fairly decent, and I just happened to be the right place, right time, and I was hired by Sony PlayStation. This is before PlayStation was even launched. So I was there. I happened to be there at the right place to grow with the company, and I was there for 12 years, and I was able to eventually supervise and head up the cinematics department. In a world of video games, back then we would create pre-rendered sequences, like the visual effects movies, the stuff that would show up as the introductory movie before you play the game. But most people, when they're playing the game, after they see the movie, they're like, okay, cool, I got the storyline, this is cool, and then they hit the X button. That's get through it. I got to get to the gameplay. Because in the world of video games, it's all about the gameplay. I can't recall the actual name of the creator of Mario or Donkey Kong from Nintendo. He was famous because he looked at the technology that was in front of him, and then he designed a game around the technology. I saw the problem a lot of game developers would go through, where they had these lofty ideas of like what could be created. But the problem is they were restricted to how well their game engine and their lead programmer could basically bring that idea to fruition. So as opposed to a game designer, creative designer, assessing the skill set of their game engine, assessing the skill set of the lead programmer, and then designing things around that to make it successful. A lot of people, crash and burn because they just can never get this wonderful idea, executed. And Seth Godin, who's like, kind of like the internet guru or online marketing guru out there, he just talks about, pros or people just. The ones that succeed are the ones that ship. You got it. Like, you have to execute and you have to ship. So where am I getting with all this stuff is that I had to realize that even though I was working for PlayStation and I had a huge toy box of all this equipment, and I got to work with some of the best visual effects artists in the world, people that have worked on all these famous films that we, have seen, The Matrix, Lord of the Rings, King Kong, whatnot, Star Wars, all that stuff. Like, they were there helping create these cinematic sequences for the department that I ran, and it was fun. It was a blast. And but however, the bottom line was we were considered fluff in the video game world, and that meant that because everything revolved around the gameplay. If the gameplay was boring or it sucked, it didn't matter how great your graphics were, people got bored, which is why, this Angry Birds, basic graphics, but people became addicted to it in a whole new platform because the gameplay was fun and it was addictive, versus some other type of game that had some of the amazing, graphics, but the gameplay might be clunky and people, would lose interest and would not do well. Well, the same could be said about filmmaking. Obviously, that story is king. So we get kind of caught up, especially in the independent film world, as you probably heard, like Jason Brubaker, a filmmaking stuff call, like gear porn, It's like we get so excited about like the latest camera coming out or the latest, lighting or whatever it might be. This concept of like, if I had the right tools or right gear, I could finally make the best film ever. But the reality is, we already have enough tools at our disposal to make something really quality. And the evidence is if you go to YouTube, cat videos that are shot on, iPhones that are, like portraits, not even done landscape style. It's done like portrait style, and it's like the worst lighting. But people will sit, millions and millions of views of these cat videos because we're interested in the content to be entertained or see the surprise or whatever it is, as opposed to some independent film that's shot, correctly on a red or something like that looks nice, but then it's just there's nothing in the context or the content that is interesting. So that was sort of the reality I was dealing with in terms of I got a chance to play in this gigantic playground in PlayStation, but I always had this feeling that as an artist, you just want to create your own stuff, and that's really what it comes down to. It doesn't matter if you're an author, a musician, a visual artist, and now a filmmaker. You kind of have this need, this bubbling urge or this curse just to create something, barf it out, express it out, just get it out there. And you would love to have a system in place where that once you created it, the people could see it, or you can make, money off it just because, because you want to move on to the next thing. But you need, the real world is you need to make some money. So with that said, my 12 years at PlayStation had ended right. We had not the best PlayStation 3 launch, and it was right around the time the economy crashed. And my department was fairly expendable, especially when you needed to make major cuts. But major cuts were happening all over all different divisions in Sony, the electronics division and so on. It was just the way things were going. So I decided to do the smart thing and, use my contacts in Los Angeles to try to make it get the independent film I was working on made and produced. I came pretty close. I had all those wonderful things that you can imagine in terms of having an opportunity to pitch it to a very prominent producer, having a fairly well-known cast, or, for the domestic market attached to the project. People were responding to the project very well. But the bottom line was something happened where I didn't put the right team together to get the thing made. As Seth Godin says, I didn't get the thing shipped, I didn't have all the elements put in place to get to that last hurdle. And when I went to the American film market and I was peddling around my film, I got an eye-opening experience of what the foreign market was really willing to pay. And you walk around that convention or that conference or that market, and you got a real sense of what people were buying and selling. And so that kind of opened my eyes to a different possibility. And there was this one panel that Stacey Parks of Film Specific was on, and she had just sort of launched her site at this particular time, and she's done an amazing job of building and sustaining an online business that helps filmmakers because of her past experience and connections as a sales agent. But she was on this panel with this other filmmaker who was talking about how he made this independent film nobody pretty much heard of, but he made a ton of money because he utilized internet marketing skills to sell it online directly to this audience. And the film wasn't necessarily great at all. I mean, but he figured out, he cracked the nut in order to make the sales. And so that just turned my, head upside down. I'm like, wait a minute. There's a possibility that you can make films really anywhere and sell it online. I just have to figure this out. Well, over the years, reality hits. Again, I'm not. I'm a father. A husband that has. We had a mortgage. Things like that. You got to sometimes just buckle down, and you got to find work and just make sure that kind of stuff is stable. But it never went away where I had this need to make something, make a film, and really wanted to know what you could do online with it. So I spent a lot of years, these past 3 years, really studying online business, online marketing, because I just, especially with the economy, the way it crashed, sort of all these things that I had done, that like the promise of like, if you work hard, you'll be rewarded. It doesn't necessarily always work true. You kind of have to know how the game is played. So I was really, really interested in how all that stuff worked. So with that said, in the last 3 years, what we've seen is when the DSLR hit, when the Canon 5D came out, and that film by Vincent, I forget his last name, the cinematographer, but that just blew the doors off. Because I remember futzing around with like 35 millimeter adapters on like HD video cameras, and like you would build this contraption that was like twice as big, and it wasn't, it was just cumbersome, and the type of lenses, that kind of stuff. It was neat. You could see like we were on the verge of breaking through, but finally when the DSLRs came through, oh my God, that was amazing. That was like a huge revolution for definitely independent film. So that was sort of the first breakthrough. I was like, okay, let's see where this pans out and where we're going to go with that. But so come fast forward, here I was living in Southern California, but stuff happens, and we had an opportunity to move to Portland, Oregon. And I kind of had this feeling like, you know what, it doesn't matter where I live. I think I can do this. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I really believe that I can make anything art-wise and put it up online. So let's just go ahead and move up to Portland, Oregon, which has a vibrant, film community, a very independent artsy sort of support group up here, which is really cool. And so when I'm sort of brand new, I got inspired by sort of the surroundings up here because, growing up in Southern California, you're sort of used to this very desert, arid, LA look. There's sort of this haze that's like this Southern California haze or smog that you see, that just, it's the way it hits the lens, the way, images are captured and stuff like that. We've seen enough of the terrain because that's like the mecca of film and, that we've seen across the world. So you get up to like Portland, Oregon, the production value just skyrocketed because you go outside of your front door and like these gigantic trees in front of you, and you're just like, oh, that's it. Like you don't have to drive that far to get these amazing like woods shots because everywhere in Oregon there's like this park left and right that has these massive trees, and creeks and rivers and mountains, and it's just crazy. So I was like, okay, so I got inspired by the location I was at, and I remember in college. Being really impressed by this film class I took when they showed us My Dinner with Andre, which was that famous film. Again, it's Louis. Yeah, I don't have the stuff. I don't have a Google in front of me, so I don't know IMDb, so I can throw it up here real quick. But that particular film, being just a simple conversation with two people at a dinner table, that was the entire feature film. But it was so so interesting, especially the conversations that they got in and the acting that, I couldn't believe I sat through like an hour and a half of this feature film and all it was is a conversation. And that sort of just floored me. I'm like, oh, what else could be done this way? And then I saw the movie Rope, finally, by Hitchcock. And the presence of that, the concept of that movie is it starts off, we just see these two guys strangling this third guy with this rope. And they put him in his chest. And then they close the chest, but a little piece of the rope that is, has strangled the guy is hanging outside of this case or this box. And these guys go on to have this, the cocktail party, and then Jimmy Stewart comes in, and it's like this crazy thing because there's a dead body in the in the case, and the whole time you're watching this this play basically play out in this one room. But the suspense and the element of that one hanging, dangling rope was there. So there's the inspiration for this movie that I decided to come up with, called The Cube. And it was, I think honestly it was possibly in response to a subconscious reaction to Richard Kelly's film The Box with Cameron Diaz and James Marsden and Frank Langella. I really like that movie, but it ends in such a downer, it's like, it kind of just, and I don't necessarily think that, it kind of turned like a weird turn in the middle with Space Aliens, I think, or something like that. But it was still well done to me. It was interesting. It was fascinating. It just felt like a really prolonged Twilight Zone episode that just ended on a major downer. So my reaction to that was, with The Cube, is taking all these elements, like being inspired by My Dinner with Andre, something as simple as two people talking, and then being inspired by The Rope, Hitchcock's film, with this element that was always hanging there, which is this dangling rope, and then mix that with The Box, which is just this simple premise of like, what happens when the object shows up at your door? What do you do with it? So that was it. So The Cube was like, what happened if this mysterious red cube showed up at this couple's doorstep, and then what would unravel? Because the cube is sort of benign. It doesn't do anything. But I love the idea, like the couple starts, falling apart, or their relationship is challenged because of this unusual supernatural thing showing up at the doorstep. And I have to reiterate that they have to, get rid of the cube. As they get rid of the cube, another one mysteriously comes back and back and back. And so that was it. But two of my favorite films are 2001: Space Odyssey and Anchorman. As you can imagine, they're two different style of films. So I kind of say, like, if you mesh those two together, that was my sort of baseline of what I was trying to do with The Cube. So I'm proud of the little movie. I couldn't believe it, because we went ahead and I kind of wrote it together. It had a simple beginning, middle, and end. I saw it, and it could be actually made in my own home and around the surroundings of Oregon. And I was just like, wow, this is possible. This is actually doable around my full-time job, something that I could shoot after work on the weekends and all that kind of stuff. Because prior to that, a lot of the film projects I would write were too big. And I think anybody can attest to this. Like, if you're writing a script and you're getting into like the sci-fi, like action film or something like that, being on the production end for so long, over 20 years, I know that when I was writing something, I would write a scene and then stop myself and say, that just cost $1 million. I just wrote a scene that's going to cost $1 million. Because it's like, I just wrote something that was too big. Like, the story's too big. Like, I was aware of my limitations of the reality of my world, being, a father, a husband, working full time, knowing what happens, how much time I could really spend and what could I do well. And seeing, I don't know, I just felt comfortable. It was a challenge to me. I just really wanted to find something so tiny that I can make, that it was just for me. It was just had no rhyme or reason. So I spent the last few years trying to reverse engineer what the market would want. So I had created all these projects and write all these stories, but stop halfway through because I said, I don't know if I'm passionate about it. And that was really the key thing. It was like, I know this is correct in terms of what the market wants, but me as a filmmaker artist, I was like, I don't feel it. Even though I'm writing it and I'm getting jazzed about it, I'm writing it, but halfway through there's something nagging at me that said, I don't know, I'm not buying it. So this project, I knew I did everything wrong. One, it's not a very defined genre. I call it a supernatural suspense movie, but it's not a serious horror film, and it's not a serious sort of thriller film. It's sort of, it gets into like maybe my wife says it might be too heady, like 2001 was, where at the end of the movie, people were still like, what the hell just happened? But those who really get 2001 were like, oh my God, that's like one of their favorite films because it's a different experience. And not to say that I'm Kubrick at all. This is sort of my bastardized version of my attempt at it. But the whole point was, I knew that it had no defined, genre that was sellable. And on top of that, it had no major stars in it. had no known actors, and I didn't necessarily plan to be in the film, but I had started to do some acting up here in Portland because I hadn't done it since I was in my early 20s. And now that my daughter was older and I was up here in this new city, I kind of wanted to get to know people. And and the reality is there's a lot of white people up here in Portland. And so when I show up at the agency, I have this unique sort of half Asian, half white guy look. So I get this, like, are you Hawaiian? Are you exotic? So I have this look that the market can utilize because there's not a lot of people that necessarily look like me up here in the market. So I've been able to get a lot of work just because of my mugshot, So I was having fun again. I haven't done acting in a long time, and I was really rusty, but I decided, like, hell, maybe I'll be in this film. And then I got this actress through Craigslist. It sounds so bad, so wrong, but what happened, because I didn't know anybody still in Portland. I was still brand new, so I didn't know the community. So I was just doing reaching out that way, and I did a screen test with 3 actresses because we needed to find out who would look like on camera, like it was evident that we look like a married couple. So it was really who I gelled with the best. So we did a screen test with 3 different actresses, and I showed different people the performance and just, separately. And everybody unanimously said that that actress, you guys look like you're a couple, you look like a real married couple. The other actresses were fine. It was just my reaction or my interaction with them probably wasn't the best because, like I said, my acting wasn't as strong, but it just seemed to work better with this particular actress. So she was really cool, and she said, hey, guess what? I'm leaving to hike in Nepal for a couple of weeks, so I'm leaving in 3 weeks. So if you want to get this thing done, we should probably get going. So I said, oh my God, I don't have a crew. I don't know, because I don't know anybody. I try to get some free help here and there. So she forced my hand. It wasn't intentional, and I knew I had because I was working shooting on the Canon Rebel T3i, which is like the European equivalent of the D60, or I don't remember what it's called, but it's all I know is shot. It's like sort of the same specs as the original 7D. And so it had, decent, a low light ratio, and it shot 1080p, and it shot 24 frames per second. And I was like, and it accept interchangeable lenses. And I was like, good, I'm done, because I was thinking it's going to go online. I didn't have any lofty aspirations. It's going to go in a theater or anything like that. So the cool thing about that particular camera has that built-in LCD screen, flip screen. So I could set up the camera on a tripod, flip it around, and see myself in the camera, so I can kind of get an approximation of where my composition was. And then I would take a separate boom stand and create this little panel, like a focus chart, just so I have an idea where the focus is going to be. Go back behind the camera, adjust the focus to that boom stand with the so I have I can approximately get the focus correct. Take the boom stand out, and you just hit record and let it run. Because the great thing about digital, you just let it run. But then most of the time with that camera, sometimes I don't know what happens. It's like I'll look over and it says the movie recording has stopped, unexpectedly. So I would lose a lot of shots. And then what we did for audio, I just had it on a separate audio recorder. I have a Tascam DR100. It's sort of like the equivalent of the Zoom H2. I don't know what. You guys got to forgive me. I don't know these equipment offhand per se. I don't have it in front of me. But if you go to freegearguide.com, I actually wrote it out. So you can actually get that because I can't remember it. So we put the microphone stand, a boom stand off to the side and hanging over our heads. And the main thing I had to do as a director was reimagine my scenes and my shot list so everything worked off mostly static shots, meaning that the camera was not going to move. There was hardly any dolly or slider, actions or handheld action. A lot of this stuff was going to be static. So then it was really challenging me as a storyteller to be as a director, how do I make static shots interesting? And I really didn't overthink it. I mean, it got to the point where it was it felt more like a TV show in a sense where, every scene kind of starts with give me a wide establishing shot. Then we go a medium shot. And then we just go to a close-up. That's it. And then once in a while, because we had this cube there, it allowed me to do a lot of the scenes where the cube was in the foreground, and then the actors or myself and the actress were in the background. So you didn't see our faces, but you could hear, see our actions. And we just put the presence on the cube, because since that was going to be the name of the movie, and it was inspired by the movie The Rope, how he always had that rope sort of dangling in frame someplace. And that sort of just created a very basic framework of how we shot the film, me or nobody, you just hit record because there was no behind the camera. And then, and believe it or not, I was getting these scenes put together, and I was editing them together, and I'm like, this is actually kind of coming together. And because every day I was able to see realistically what I was dealing with, it helped me reimagine what the film could be. And I was just accepting it, as opposed to trying to force this, whatever circle into a square peg or something like that. It just, I wasn't forcing it. I was just allowing it to happen and just trying to adapt to what was given to me. I should point out too, like in terms of lighting, those who want to get technical about it, what I did was that I remember this conversation with the DP for Half Nelson, the film that Ryan Gosling was nominated for an Oscar for. Really low budget film, really good film. The DP was talking about how he would just light the space, meaning that wherever they were going to film, because he never knew what sort of improvisation that Ryan Gosling was going to do, like his acting. So they just had to make sure that the space was lit correctly, and he was just following him around with the camera. And so that got me thinking, like, well, in my house, if I replace every single light bulb with these daylight fluorescent light bulbs you get at Home Depot that match the color tone to the color temperature to the outside, because I knew I was going to have a lot of outdoor light. And the great thing about Portland is, like, when we get into the fall and fall through, basically anything non-summery, Portland has I guess every day is like a little bit overcast, well, it's just like, it's really gray. But what that means for a cinematographer is like you have a gigantic silk. The entire sky is always like this, nice even silk. Like you never get these harsh shadows, like as in LA or Southern California, where you have so much sunlight that you got to control the sunlight, so that you don't get these harsh shadows on your actors' faces. But here in Portland, it's like a constant psych, built-in psych, it's just a silk, boom. And so that light was coming into the house, and I needed to make sure that the indoor lighting was matching the same color temperature. So in person, if you go into the house, it looked ugly. It's like, just imagine like a house full of bright, fluorescent lighting. It looked terrible. But when you white balance and get the in your camera, it looked amazing. So the thing was, that was one of the tricks that I did, was every day I would have to switch out all the light bulbs, because my wife would go to work and then she would come back. I would have to make sure that I got all the light bulbs switched out, because she would, she wanted her mood lighting back in, which is those warmer tungsten style, or a halogen, or what do you call it? I don't know.
Hey, Skype.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, sorry. It looks like Skype just dumped the call.
Oh, okay.
So the last thing I heard was your wife wanted her tungsten lights back.
Okay. So here we go. Hey, so we've I figure I was just talking so much I just broke Skype, but sorry. I'm trying to give you guys like a full picture of like how I ended up going from working at PlayStation to trying to get a film produced and made up in Los Angeles, to why did we move to Portland, and how did the creation of this little film called The Cube was made. And so now we're in the technical things. And like you said, the last thing you heard before Skype dumped us out was like the fun thing is like when you're shooting your own house, it's still your own house. And my wife works a hard day at work. She likes to come home to her house, to have some sanity. So I got to make sure that things are taken care of, either cleaned up, or like the lighting at least is like changed out. And so that was a fun challenge, because I was just by myself doing that, and because I didn't have a crew. But when you think about it, it's not that much. You've got a boom mic, or on a boom stand. You throw some basic lighting. That's if you already lit the space or just changing out light bulbs, then the lighting already exists. And then once in a while, I have this one fluorescent light that I move around as a key light. just to do some fill when it was too dark in the house. And that was it. I mean, it wasn't very basic. And so by filming it, I wanted to make sure that we, whatever was recording in the camera, what I called flat, meaning like I didn't do too much with the ISO or the aperture. I just wanted to make sure that enough data was, now we're getting all technical geeky here, but the data, that there was enough zeros and ones that were being recorded into the card, because I knew that I was going to take this image and I knew I was going to go into post-production and I was going to, over colorize it or over, I needed to make sure that it was shot flat enough that the data was there that allowed me to crush the blacks as dark as I wanted to, or make the whites as white as I wanted to, and have enough range in the data that to do that. It's like if I mucked around too much in camera, then it hindered my ability to fix it in post. So that's it. So the story again I was trying to make it simple, but because I wanted to make it a suspense or a mystery, I thought that would be engaging enough, because I really wanted to make sure that the story, when you're watching it, you're just wondering like, well, what happens next? What happens next? And you don't even worry about whether or not the production value is low, if the acting is passable. I had some stories about the acting. Because I knew I was editing it and all that kind of stuff, I had this scene with my buddy and the actress, Dana, and myself, and I only had the one microphone, so I didn't have somebody to, operate boom. So it was just kind of sitting there capturing the audio. But I knew the microphone was so far away that my acting, I was purposely kind of speaking louder than I needed to, because I knew in the back end I needed to have the audio be somewhat clean. And then the other two actors were being normal, so they were actually acting well. They were where I wasn't, and their voices were softer and more intimate, and I was like thinking to myself like, oh my God, I'm not going to get any of that on the audio. so my acting in the scene is like they're being normal like this or talking like this, and then I'm like super loud going, but what about this, and we got to do this, and like so it made my acting looks like dog shit, So when I went and edited, I put my volume down. I was able to crank their volume up, and I tried to not have so much footage of me on there, because anything to eliminate the bad acting. Like I said, the acting is passable. It's nothing, going to win awards or anything like that. But it was enough to tell the story, and there's enough mystery in it to keep the viewer going, to wondering what happens next. And that's really what was important to me, because that's why I was trying to keep the audience in mind as well. Like, hey, if I'm going to ask you to watch this little dinky film that was made for nothing, and by the way, because I had owned all this equipment over the years for my work, doing video production work for freelance in the full-time job I was doing at the time. I had already accumulated this over the years. So what do you do with all this equipment? Well, the actual film only costs $500 to make, and a lot of that money went to like this Buddha statue I needed to get for the film. And that was it. Because here's some other tricks to kind of keep the cost down. One, don't pay for meals. But you don't shoot during meals. So like if you can shoot at the hours from like 9 to 11:30, then you have your cast and crew make sure they eat their breakfast, they fend for themselves, and then they take care of themselves at lunch, and you pick up again at maybe 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and you go to 5. You don't pay for dinner. It's kind of like, if you're working at a regular job, like a lot of companies don't pay for your, breakfast or your lunch or dinner, like you're supposed to take care of yourself. So if you kind of do that, you can get these little 3-hour, 4-hour, 5-hour chunks in. You don't have to deal with the expense of the meal. Yes, it's fragmented, but this is for people that have a full-time job. Like their shooting schedules are going to be fragmented anyway. So I just focused on like one scene at a time. But because it was my house, I was able to have them come in and go, look, we're just going to film this one scene in the kitchen, and we're going to do all the scenes in the kitchen. We're done. Next time we're in the house, we're in the living room or whatever it might be. And so it took some time. It wasn't like a fast shoot. It was just a slow bleed. But that's the reality for a lot of independent filmmakers that have full-time work. and that's okay. But if you want to get around the expenses, just shoot in during the hours that people are not going to be eating, and just not be in. That's it. So I was able to keep the cost down. So we get through this thing. I finished the movie, and I'm watching it come together, and you get all your emotions of high and low, and I was just excited to be like, man, wait, I'm pinching myself. Like, I can't believe that I'm actually making a movie, a story, that I didn't have a crew. This is actually kind of sort of working. Like, I began to see how this film could operate, and then but then I didn't know what to do with it. So I'm like, I'm done with it, and I'm thinking to myself, like, well, I did everything wrong. Like I said, I don't have any stars. It has not a defined genre. I go, do I want to do film festivals? I don't know if I want to do film festivals, because I remember when I was at the American Film Market, Jonathan Wolfe, who is the head of the Independent Film Producers Association, who they put on the American Film Market, at his symposium, this very small, I don't know how I got into this thing. There was like maybe 30 people in it. And he was just sitting there, and he gets up on the podium, and he says, hey, here's my advice to you. Don't take your film to a film festival. He goes, and everybody's like up in arms, like, what are you talking about? This is years ago. And he said, here at the film market, the whole point is you don't want to kind of blow your wad on whether your exposure to the marketplace if you go to a film festival, because you may diminish your opportunity to make a sale at the market. It's kind of like that. And so I kind of got where he was going with it. And the stories that we see, those people that go to film festivals are really the ones that are sort of prominent. And here's the interesting thing: we just recently had the Toronto International Film Festival, and there was an article that came out on one of the posts. Blogospheres or blogs out there, I think it might have been IndieWire. They talked about the amount of money that was being offered to these independent films, and I always love it because their perspective, an independent film was like a film that stars Robert Downey Jr. or Julianne Moore, or like all these like known stars. And like they were making sales of anywhere from like $1 million or less than that. And the only film that made a huge splash was a Chris Rock film that was like a standard sort of comedy film. They sold for $12 million. That was pretty high, but everything else was getting like $1 million, $2 million. And that was at a very prominent film festival, film market, because that usually marks the beginning of the Oscar race. And but you know what? That represents like a very small percentage of people working in the independent film scene. There's a lot of people like, myself out there that just have gear, that are just, making small stuff. We may have sort of a known person, but not like a superstar or anything like that. We're not in that world. So where does that leave us? Like what's the state of independent film for that? And I remember finishing The Cube and thinking like, I guess I'm just going to sell it online. But I was really fascinated because I was watching a lot of Apple TV at the time, and really realizing my viewing habits were changing, watching a lot of Netflix, buying a lot of films and renting a lot of films on iTunes right through the Apple TV. And I was thinking to myself, like, well, how do you get it on Apple TV? And so that's when I discovered about the aggregators. And in the process of discovering about the aggregators, I happened to meet at that particular time. I was studying up on this aggregator, distributor, and they're owned by Indiegogo. And they were very simple. It's like, hey, we charge a flat fee, like $1,500 to $2,500 if you want HD version. All we do is we take your film and we get it to those platforms. We get it to Netflix, we get it to Amazon, Hulu, and iTunes. We are basically an approved aggregator, so you can get your film on those platforms. And then the interesting thing at that time was there were a lot of other aggregators that were trying to take 50-50. Like, I'll take, a 50-50 split or 70-30 split. And where distributor was literally like, no, it's a flat fee. Boom, here it is. Use it. And so I had emailed distributor to clarify, like, whoa, this is crazy. So I remember like writing an email, like, do I get this right? Like, any filmmaker can just create their film, make sure that the technical specs are up to the standards that need to be, that the aggregation company will just submit it to these platforms, and this is without ever going through a distribution company. And the person right back to me says, yep, that's correct. And I said, and I followed up by saying, what does this mean for the sales agents or the producers reps? So when I was at the American Film Market, there was all these sales agents, trying to, peddle different films around. They were sort of the middlemen taking film products, trying to bunch them together. So if you had a horror film, they were trying to bundle a bunch of, look at me, I'm tongue-tied, sorry, bundle. They were taking several different horror films and they bundle together and sell that off as a package to a foreign territory. So the thing is, it's like, if you didn't need to go through a distribution company, if somebody could literally be on iTunes and they find your film and rent it, what does that mean to all these middlemen, the sales agents? And my thing was like, it could mean that this is it. They could be ending. And the person at distributor wrote back, says, well, I can't speak for them, but I do believe that the paradigm is shifting. And that person happened to be Jason Brubaker, because I remember that email and I kept that email. So years later, about a year and a half later, maybe a year later, boom, all of a sudden, all these direct distribution platforms start hitting the marketplace. Vimeo on Demand, Distrify, VHX TV, more aggregation companies started to pop up, saying they can get your film onto all these platforms. The viewing habits began to change. I mean, literally like in a year, like maybe last year, we saw an explosion of different direct distribution platforms out there for filmmakers. So I saw in the last few years, maybe the last 5 years, we've seen the explosion of the DSLR that changed the game, changed the playing field. We saw so production is no longer a barrier, because anybody can make a film. I can attest to that. I mean, I just made a feature film for $500 with no crew. So it's totally possible. Not only that, there's now distribution is no longer an issue because you can put it up online like I have done with Vimeo on Demand, and you can sell it to a worldwide market directly. So that left the last barrier, which was film marketing. And film marketing, because that's the whole point. It's like, well, how do you get people to know that your stuff exists? And how do you get them to come to your site or come to see your film? Do we still utilize the old paradigm of, getting into a film festival, waiting months on months to see if you do well at the festival, to see anybody, discovers you and maybe they buy you and, pay for your film, and then you are then invited to meet the studios and make a film for the studios. I mean, that's sort of like the dream, I had this, we get a chance, I have my podcast on filmtrooper.com that I interviewed Warren Pelly of Paranormal Activity, because he and I both worked at Sony PlayStation, and it was fascinating because it's an hour and a half long interview that we go step by step about how he got Paranormal Activity made. And when you listen to that, it's amazing because we go through all the emotions up and down. But there's not the element of luck, but there's some things that had to happen to make that thing become the phenomenon that it was. And that sort of just gives you perspective. Like in business, you kind of want to have more predictability as opposed to holding on to this dream of being discovered or being lucky in getting discovered. So that was sort of this change in mindset as all this stuff was going on. Like I was much more interested now in well, how do you market correctly online? So that's where, as I spoke, for 45 minutes straight, Dave, I'm sorry, you didn't get any interaction. I don't even know if you're still there.
Yeah, I'm still here.
So that is the thorough story. I hope it was entertaining enough, but somebody who's gone to film school, worked at a corporation, worked in a big sandbox, tried to get a film done the traditional way, work in the film markets, deciding that something is changing, went ahead and just needed to get a film off his plate, out of his just out of his system, which is what the Cube was, because I knew that I did everything incorrectly in terms of marketing wise, and that was fine with me because I didn't spend a lot of money, so it wasn't like I made a $500,000 film where now I'm sweating trying to figure out how I'm going to get the investors' money paid back. The ability to make something so inexpensive was a creative, it was liberating, and now I can focus on enhancing the marketing skills online. To do the next project better and do it correctly. And so that's where I'm at right now. But here's the thing. You probably discovered me through filmtrooper.com. And Filmtrooper was a site that I created in response to creating the movie The Cube. Because here's my thing is you go to a film festival, what's the first thing that after the film is done during the Q&A panel, someone always raises their hand, and usually the first question out the gate is, what did you shoot it on, and what was your budget? Like, it doesn't matter what film, because nobody cares about what your film is about, or sometimes or what you're trying to say with your film. A lot of people just want to know, like, well, what did you do to make that thing? You know, like the process of making something is much more fascinating than the actual product itself sometimes. So knowing that ahead of time, I decided to use that as the first step out of the gate as the unique selling proposition, which is, if you want to see a feature film that was made for $500 with no crew, you can check this one out. And then I wanted to have a platform where I discuss more about these things I'm talking about: online marketing, the change in the independent film space, like who is addressing answers for the micro budget filmmaker, the mini filmmaker, the independent filmmaker that's not part of the Hollywood system, that's not part of the, I call like the sub-independent film industry, you know, that still operates on, you know, bonds and, E&O insurance and things like that, you know, that works with distribution companies. What about all those other filmmakers? Who's talking to them, and who's expressing the same struggles to them? And there's only a few people that do that, but I wanted to enter the space online and have a platform for discussion, which is why Film Trooper was created, because it was designed to help filmmakers become entrepreneurs, especially in the online space. So, and I wanted to share all of my failures and what I'm trying to do to improve it, and then bring down all the things that I'm studying and learning and telling other filmmakers, like, well, this is what the experts of internet marketing say that we need to do. Let's see if we apply it and what happens when we apply it. So Film Trooper has become this platform for that. And I launched that about a year ago, almost. We're almost at the year anniversary. And it's been fun. It's been fun to be able to meet filmmakers like yourself and other people to have this discussion. And I can take a quick break if you want to ask me some other questions that I might have missed, but I would love to talk about where I think a whole subset of the film industry might be going, and how, as Uber independent micro budget filmmakers like ourselves can survive and prosper in the upcoming age. So I can grab some water here real quick.
Sure, no problem. So as you were talking about making the Cube, you mentioned about getting a crew together, and as I was talking to Jason Brubaker, who was on the last episode, he also was saying that too, because putting a crew together is a challenge, or a mini project in of itself, because you have to put together a team that not only will work together well and the quote unquote synergistic effect and complement each other well, but also they have to be available, and they're not going to be like, okay, the day before the shoot, all of a sudden go, oh, I can't make it because I'm going to go on another shoot that pays more, or I just don't want to do this anymore, or I think a lot of people have had that happen, and they've experienced that whole all of a sudden whether it's cast or crew, the day of, you get a phone call and it's like, yeah, I can't do this project anymore because I have a vacation I forgot about. And you're like, what? That's actually happened. I've actually had that excuse come to me a couple times. But yeah, I completely understand that too, Scott. And a couple of other things too was, the traditional thought is in the Western world is, if we do hard work, we want a reward for it. And in the Eastern world, it's the work itself is the reward. And, as I talked a lot to guests on the podcast, and one thing I've learned, especially learning from Stephen Pressfield, who I'm hoping to have on the podcast, is that even when you're writing a script, even if that never gets produced, you just either move on to the next one, and hopefully that writing that was just a reward enough. And because it can get very frustrating if you constantly focus on that stuff.
Yeah, agreed.
So that's why, if you have a chance, I'm going to put it in the link in the show notes. But Stephen Pressfield had an interview, and he wrote a book called The War of Art, and he wrote three other sequels to it, called Do the Work. The third one was called Turning Pro, and the fourth one is called the Fool's Cap Method, I believe. But it's all about how you actually write and beating resistance and getting through all this stuff. And it's actually pretty eye opening. But I'm going to put that video in the show notes. But as you wrote the script for The Cube, how long did it take you to write that?
Yeah, so it's great you brought up Steven Pressfield, by the way, and you're right, because his whole concept there is if you're going to be a pro, you just do the work. You fight through the resistance and you do the work. And, and you're not you don't give in to resistance. And that whole keyword, you'll understand when you read the book, The War of Art. And he's got an amazing blog as well that a lot of people follow because he can get into some nitty gritty about the publishing world as well. And then Seth Godin took that and said, look, professionals in business, they ship. It might not be perfect, but they just get the damn thing done. They ship. And so that's important because when you're futzing around half the time, you got to just stop and go, I got to do the work if I'm going to be a pro. And I just got to ship if I'm like legit, And it just cuts to the core. There's no messing around about it. You either do or you don't, I guess like Yoda would say. But so the problem is we know this about the creative process. Sometimes you can go through years of I spent years starting and stopping a project, but I was always creating something. Either I was, expressing myself, trying to learn how to, make music better. I'm a hack guitarist, but I have some equipment and I'm trying to learn GarageBand. I'm no expert by any means, but enough to make, a few drone sounds sound like a little bit like a music, but that was a creative process. Or visually, either drawing, doing doodles or something, acting is a creative outlet, and filmmaking is such a wonderful combination of all those things that you never get bored, especially because it also involves the writing process. So as a creative person, you start and stop, you have different things that you just need to get out of it's a curse. It's like a gift and a curse. You need to be expressive somehow. And then one day, you always hear about this, the moments in life where you just have to let go, when everything seems so out of your control, then you just have to just let it all go. Mentally, spiritually, everything. And so what had happened was the full-time job that I had, that I was working remotely up here in Portland, one day they were like, oh, we can't pay your paycheck this week. And you're kind of like, what? So it's so the company's having problems. And so it's great. I've been in and out of different jobs, different freelance jobs, and certain companies I've been with, and then they fall apart. It's just I've been through the rigmarole of getting laid off enough times in my life. It's just that emotion, and especially in the freelance world, you're just used to that rhythm of life of when's the next job coming or not the next job. And as we're getting older, and I'm thinking about where do I go with my future, in that kind of thing. And I just remember, I got to get it out of my headspace. I just got to let this all go, right? Right now, life is kind of hitting you in the face a little bit. You're I'll just, I can stress out about it, or I can just take a deep breath and just sort of surrender into whatever life has in front of you. And it happened to be my wife's birthday. And I knew that, what, I'm not going to bring it down and be so in my headspace about my own crap. It's I'm here to let go, make sure she has a great time. We're going to be out with friends, and family. So we had just a fantastic night that night, just, chilling out, just being with, with your close ones, your loved ones. And then that night we had visited our friend's new apartment in Portland. It was a really cool apartment. It overlooked the city, and it was just, I was in a good space, mentally and spiritually, that I think what happened was that night, was really inspired by the apartment that I couldn't sleep. I had my imagination just went wild. And I woke up the very next morning and had a very clear idea. I just think I have a movie idea. I really, it's one of those things, I'm sure we all do. Sometimes, I got a great movie idea. But this one was actually felt tangible, because I was it's a simple, really simple idea. And I go, I guarantee you somebody's already done it or it had some similarities to it. But I'm screw it. Because that old story about the movie Tom Hanks, Big, where he's a little boy that makes a wish and he becomes a 20-year-old, the 30-year-old man or something like that. Well, what's fascinating about that story is that when it came out in 85, 87, I don't remember, that was the fifth movie of that type that had come out that year, and it was the last movie of that type to come out that year. But nobody remembers the other four because the movie Big was the best one of them all that came out that had the same sort of premise. Not to say that Cube is like the best one of them all, but I wasn't worried. I wasn't too worried about whether or not the idea had been used or it was like an homage to other ideas. It didn't matter to me at all. It was very personal, and it was simply like, it's a simple enough idea that I see the beginning, middle, and end. I woke up that morning, wrote the outline in a couple hours, and then over the next few weeks was able to get the script finished, to fine tune it. But it was pretty close to what that inspiration I had that night. And I think a lot of it was just simply because I let go. I let go, and I was in a better headspace. And I knew what I was creating, again, was logically, like experts in the independent film world or marketing world be like, you're doing completely wrong. You never even built an audience. You don't even know what they want. None of that crap. It was literally, no, you're right. It's just an artist having an idea and then seeing it through. Doing the work, as Pressfield says, you do the work. As Seth Godin says, you ship, because I got it out there and it's on for sale. And what it did do was, it was just something for me personally. It was like, I did it. And first of all, I can't believe I did it without a crew, because you're right. You do stumble across those things, which is like headaches when you work with certain people. Like, it's not working. They're kind of, it's not gelling. The experience is not as really fun, And I almost felt like, this is liberating to know, like, hey, I'm not beholden. Like, I know I can make a film and I don't have to worry about having a crew because I can figure these things out with just the way the gear is set up now. And I'm good with that, because you always know you have that in your back pocket. And I remember we had a scene, a party scene, like a wine party scene, and we were drinking real wine. And I thought too much, because I was like, you know what, we're just going to have all our friends, we'll just do it. We'll do the scenes. And the funny thing is, near the end of the night, our performances got really crappy because everybody was getting drunk. And so their energy levels were low. But I remember letting go even in that scene, because I could be more high strung and trying to make it perfect. But I was aware of my situation. I was aware that I was making a film that's not going to, go to film festivals, probably not going to win any awards or anything like that. So why ruin this moment that's happening right there at the present time, which is people are having a great time, and I'm getting bits and pieces of a scene, and I just figure it out later in the editing space that I'll make something out of it. And it never tainted the experience for those having a good time. Maybe the work could be better if I was, forced as I could be a more forceful director trying to get them to work that way. But that wasn't what this project was. This project was just, let's have a good time. Let's make something. It's done. It's out there. And I felt good about it. But what the great thing, it opened the floodgates creatively for me personally, because now I began to see so many other stories that you could do in your own house, in like a coffee shop or whatever it is, and knowing that I could do it without a crew. And so I was on Stacey Park's podcast on Film Specific, and she was asking, like, do I have aspirations of going bigger, with the next film? And I said, no, actually I don't. I have this feeling like where George Lucas, created this huge empire, Skywalker Sound, Skywalker Ranch, ILM, did all the Star Wars films and whatnot. It's kind of interesting. Technically, if you look at it, I think like Empire Strikes Back may be the most successful independent film ever, because he took the proceeds, his profits from like Star Wars, and he funded through Lucasfilm to make Empire Strikes Back. He just sold the rights to work with 20th Century Fox to do the distribution part of it. But he'll never be seen that way. They'll never be seen like his Star Wars films or independent films. But he did it at like the ultimate level, where he built a bunch of different companies, ILM, all these things to fund all his other passions to make his films. And I remember reading someplace where the last three Star Wars films, The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, or the last one, Revenge of the Sith, it's almost like they said, like, George Lucas essentially made his own fan film. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like, if you kind of look at that perspective, you're like, yeah, a lot of people have made a lot of Star Wars fan films, but he had the money and the resources to make the ultimate fan film. He was able to make 3 of them. So if you take it that way, then you can sit better knowing like the originals aren't tainted, you know, something like that. It's just like, just look at the last 3 that he made as the ultimate fan film. Anyway, I digress. So then you have like somebody, Robert Rodriguez, who's out in Austin, Texas, outside of Hollywood, and he built his Troublemaker Studios, and he has like a not as big of an empire as George Lucas, but he's got a small little group that he's able to just do his stuff, shoot like all his films on his soundstage, his green screen studio, and you know he edits in that big house of his or whatever it is, but he's able to do it. And I've always had this feeling that I always wanted to do it on a much smaller scale. Like I like the idea of putting all your film gear in a backpack, and then going out wherever you're at, you know, setting it up, or you know, so you don't have a lot of hassle, a lot of gear and stuff like that, and you just start making films that are in front of you with some people that you just have a great time with. And being on the acting front, I can attest that it's really fun when you see such interesting performances. You know, when somebody is just nailing a scene, or they just it's invigorating. I don't know what I explained if you've ever, you know, been acting in front of a on stage or anything like that. There's something about it, and if you can capture that magic, and you can do it without a lot of this other crap that's, you know, around you, you know, with all this, you know, equipment and gear and crew, and you make it more intimate, you might be able to capture something that's unique. And I like that, and I like saying like, well, how can I make a living out of this? Like, how can I make little films like that and just sell them online and make a living like that? And so that's my aspirations. Like I said, I've had my time over 12 years working in a big sandbox, and I'm comfortable doing that. But there's something personal to me that I wanted to create something on a smaller scale, but I'm really hell-bent in trying to figure out how you can make a sustainable living doing so. And that's why I have spent 7+ years studying online business and online marketing. And I think we're at the verge of seeing this happen. And this is where I wanted to talk to you about. But I think the concept is, there was a famous blog by Kevin Kelly. Yeah, I think of former editor of Wired magazine. He wrote this blog post called 1,000 True Fans. And the concept there is that any artist, whether you're a visual artist, an author, a musician, and now a filmmaker, if you can earn and garner 1,000 true fans every year that will be willing to give you $100 a year, then you can make a nice living, you know, $100,000 a year. So maybe that's what the goal is to build your work and create value and honor those fans, honor that audience with something of value of $100 every year. So then you have to see your film as something uniquely different. Because maybe it's not just the film. Because if you're trying to do it the traditional way, if independents are trying to match what the studio systems have been doing, or the distribution companies, you know, they're trying to get as many eyeballs on it as possible, or they're trying to cut deals with the different foreign buyers and so on. I don't know if you know, like, this is what I learned from it. Like, so we have. Let me know if I'm going too far, because I know I'm babbling way too much. So if we had a time limit, let me know, Dave.
No, we're all good. We're all good, Scott.
Okay. So this is what I learned. So we all know there's Hollywood, right? We all know that that's the studio system. And there's all this like backlash about them, you know, pumping out all these superhero films. Well, the reality is like they work in a different paradigm. They have stockholders, so they're a public traded company. They have, you know, the people running those studios, their incentive is to make money, and the same amount of effort that goes into making a mid-level film about like $20 million, the same amount of effort to make that happen, make it successful, is the same as if you're spending $102 million on a superhero film. The difference is those type of superhero films reach a large audience universally, globally, and they're hot right now, and they continue to be so. And so it means a lot more to a studio exec to spend more time and spending more money that way, because they know that the back end they're going to make more money. So what's happened is a lot of these, once there used to be a lot of these like maybe $60 to $30 million films that were made, they're no longer in the the release schedule of these studios. So the studio system, it represents less than 1% of the sort of operations of the world's entertainment. However, they are able to broadcast out to the world about almost 90% of the media, right? So it's like a very small 1% is able to do so much. And I had written a blog post for oh God, don't do this to me. Wait, the Ted Hope, yeah. So Ted Hope's site. So I wrote a blog post for Ted Hope's site called "Why 1% is the Most Important Number for Filmmakers." And there's a whole concept. If you look at this weird anomaly with the 1%, obviously there's the March Against Wall Street, or was like, the 99% against the 1%. I don't know. I almost feel like that's just sort of the natural law of things. Like 1% will actually always have 80% or, control, or 90% control of a lot of things, and that you see it on the internet space as well. If you're part of a forum group or a community, look at the number of people that are in that community, and then really look at the number of people that are always actively involved in the conversation. It's about 1%. And so we look at actors in the SAG, less than 1% make over 100,000 a year. So it's like we only see certain stars that get all the press, and they're making all this money in terms of $1 million contracts or $1 million payouts or whatever it might be, but they represent less than 1% of all the working actors in the guild and in the world. And the same thing with writers, and same thing with filmmakers, and so on. So that understanding how that world works. Okay, so that's how they do it. And I had also written another blog post called "Hollywood is not in the film business. They are in the business of exploiting licenses." And what that means is that their main goal is not to make a film. Their main goal is to control a license. When Paramount buys the Transformer license, they know that the film is going to be a tentpole, sort of like a huge advertisement for all the other things they're going to exploit that license for, maybe a TV cartoon, TV show, merchandise, and so on. And we we could bring this all back to George Lucas, who knew this, who understood this principle when he retained the control of all the licensing rights for the Star Wars license, or the product, because he made more money on the toys and all the merchandise that went through it than he did on the actual film. So Hollywood got wise and said, okay, well, we're not going to give a filmmaker like that, power to that ever again. So that's why Hollywood's always buying up licenses, why they're taking books that have been popular, the Twilight series, the Hunger Games, 50 Shades of Grey, whatever it might be. They're taking something that has already built an audience, that has a license that they can potentially exploit, So you don't see a lot of original content coming out of Hollywood, because that's not their incentive. Their incentive is to exploit that license to the end degree, And that makes a lot of sense, because then you're thinking like, all right, then a film is really nothing more than an advertisement for this license that could be sold for a bunch of different things. So then you have this other industry, this sort of, I call it that is told to us as the independent film world. And this is like, because there's enough blog posts and articles and, news people covering all these different film festivals. But the thing is, that sub-industry sort of operates off this, the foreign market. And when you go to a place like the American film market, it's the same people, it's the same sales agents, the same buyers and sellers of films, same distribution companies that are at the Cannes film market. So the difference is that the Cannes film market, there's also a Cannes Film Festival. And the film festival gets all this press, because that's where all the stars show up at the big red carpet. But there's a market that is happening at the same time, with people buying and selling, peddling films. There's an HBO documentary called Seduced and Abandoned, with Alec Baldwin, and Toback is his first name. He's a director. And they take this fun journey about trying to get this ridiculous film made, and they go to Cannes film market, and you get to see kind of the behind the scenes of really kind of like how it's done. And he gets a good taste of what the American film market is like if you ever get there in November in Santa Monica. So that same group of people show up at the American film market. They go to Berlin, I think, International Film Market, and there's a Singapore one. There's like only 4 or 5 of them throughout the year, these markets. And the same people kind of go to the same ones. So those are the people, if you want to work in that space, if you want to do that kind of independent filmmaking, then you've got to be part of that world so that you develop those contacts and conversations. And I had an interview with Ben Yenny, who's a producer's rep in San Francisco, who just wrote a great book on AFM, the Guerrilla Rep, and he's on my podcast, and he talks more about this. But building those relationships. So if you want to work in that world and that playground, then that's what you have to do. You kind of have to get to know those buyers and sellers of those films, so you know exactly how to give them what they want if you're going to make something. And then that you always hear that those are the types of independent films you always hear, like, well, you got to get a name star. What does that mean? Any star that the film buyer feels is worthy enough that they can sell to foreign territories. So the problem with that model, that independent film model, is that your audience is not your main focus. Your audience is that other sales agent or your buyer. So you're really making a film based off what they believe they can buy or sell. And the way it works is, if you create a strong genre, because I had an American comedy, and all the foreign buying agents told me that American comedies don't sell overseas. If you look at the film market, all you're seeing is horror films, action films, and that's about it. Dramas don't sell well at all. Like, yes, they get a lot of press in the publications, especially when it comes to Oscar season and stuff like that. But those are almost like pet projects for stars. They're not. Once in a while, you get a breakout indie that nobody knows anything about. But those are, again, that's a less than 1% that actually makes that happen. So the reality is, a lot of those, what we call independent films, are really just like pet projects for superstars and stuff like that. And there's only a small percentage of people working in that space. The rest of the market, you're making a horror film or action film. If you're going to make a comedy, then it's understood that you have to make a comedy that is very visual, very pranks, because I was told at that particular time the number one comedy star was Rowan Atkinson of Mr. Bean and Johnny English, because he doesn't say anything. All his comedy is physical, so his comedy translates very well across the world. So that made me understand, like, all right, so American comedy still can get made, but that you have to line yourself up with those distribution companies and those buyers in the domestic space that will buy your American comedy. If you want, that's why horror films travel so well, is because it's a very visual medium in terms of, and it's very primal. Like, everybody across the world gets scared. And if you don't have a lot of dialogue to know if something scary is happening with the music, sound effects, and somebody screaming. So that's why horror films do tremendously well overseas. And action films are just straight up like, shoot him up. Here's a bad guy. Here's a good guy. Shoot him up. Give me some good action. And that's why certain actors still do very well internationally, because they're seen as either an action star internationally, or a horror film doesn't have to have stars because people just want to get the lights scared out of them, the bejesus scared out of them. So that's sort of the breakdown. So you had to kind of decide where you want to fit into that. But that leaves the rest of the world that has access to all this camera out of their backpack, that are still making very interesting local films. That where do they go? What is the business model for them? Do they have to try to pigeonhole, stick their work into this framework that's been established, that is on a major influx of change? Like I said, with my conversation with Jason Brubaker, he said that, what use does a distribution company have when you could just take a film and place it online and you already have distribution to the world? It comes down to marketing. And now we all hear about, okay, so the filmmakers need to build their audience first. Because, well, okay, that's cool. Like, now we know, okay, well, what the hell does that mean? Build your audience first. So I'm going to take another water break. If you have any questions, keep asking me, Dave. You've been great. I don't even know if you're still there. So
yeah, I'm here. I'm actually I'm always taking notes on the side of like questions to come back on. So but yeah, I know what you mean though about building your audience first. You do hear that a lot, and you actually wonder what steps could you take to actually build an audience first. What I've seen, and I think these are mistakes, is the immediate first thing is they launch a Facebook fan page. And I think that is something that should be so far later on, because excuse me, because Facebook now only 1% is organic reach. So if you want is to start his Facebook fan page. And if you don't have any money to spend on actually, on those promotional ads so everyone will see them that actually has liked the page, then it's pretty much for naught. To me, you have a very good idea, which is the email list first. Give something away, either whether it be a video, a course, a webinar, anything really. And even if you can't do that, let's scale it back even further. I would actually if I was gonna have a launch a film or what have you, I would actually go to my email list that I already have, because I assume most people probably have anywhere from like 100 to 500 contacts. I obviously have more than that, and I'm sure you have much more than that. But I think that's probably the way to start it, and maybe go to if you wanted to launch a crowdfunding campaign for something small like $1,000 to $5,000. Maybe you could do something like that. But I think Twitter is still probably the best social media tool you could use. I know other people will say like Pinterest or maybe even Google Plus, but very rarely has any filmmaker I've ever known ever said, yeah, Facebook has been really good for us. So, I know it's the largest one, but I think really there's other steps you could do first to actually build that audience. And even if you have virtually no audience, if you have no email list, nothing, I still think if you wanted to launch a crowdfunding campaign, you could do whatever you want, but it has to be something very small. And then you have to, get the word out. You have to do a lot of heavy lifting then during the campaign, which is never actually a good thing. You want all your heavy lifting to be in your soft prep and pre-launch phases. And then have all the rest of that be like, you already have emailed these people. You've already, mentioned this. But maybe you have to actually make something first, and maybe you actually have to shoot a film like The Cube, and just funnel everything yourself, and like Oren Patel did with Paranormal Activity, and make a film, and then find an audience that way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now you're hitting on like the fun topics for me. It's like you said, like, okay, so filmmakers, you hear this, like you said. Dave just pointed out, build that organic reach, build that list. Now, that's we get down to the nitty gritty about what that list means. Okay, here's the thing. So I made this film, The Cube. Like I said, I call it a supernatural suspense movie. It's not really a specific genre. It's not a very strong genre in terms of, I even have like a Buddhist angle to it. But I thought about, like, do I market it to those people that might be interested in films that have that angle? But I know that my film, I think the expectation is those who are looking for something of the Buddhist slant are looking for something much more peaceful. And mine's gets a little raunchy, a little out there, so it's not quite, it doesn't quite fit the bill of, I think, the expectations of that audience, right? So really understanding your audience. So being that the floodgates have been open, and then I'm working on my next film, which is, my wife just says, like, hey, don't be too heady about it. Just make a really good, whatever this film you're making, which is supposed to just be a scary, haunting ghost film, ghost story. That's it. It's not a blood and gore slasher. It's not a demonic, horror film, that kind of stuff. My job is simply to make a scary film centered around a ghost story. That's it. And so what do you do? So you're like, well, where do you go? Do you go to, do you sell to other filmmakers? Because, again, Jason does a great job of this. He says, look, your job, the list that you're building is not other filmmakers, because that just, you got to be much more specific of who your audience is. So now I have beginning to build a list with different communities on Facebook and Google Plus and different places and publications of a lot of people that are just interested in the paranormal. Now you have to really niche down. Because paranormal can go into like, UFOs, it can go into Bigfoot, it can go into like, time travel, whatever it might be. But if you want to, like, I need to make sure I'm in line with ghost stories, and so now I had to build this list of like bloggers, podcasters, people that already have this audience that are talking about real stories. And then my job is to follow and absorb and listen, and then figure out a way that I could offer value or offer conversation within this community. I haven't done anything. I haven't said I'm making a film, nothing like that. My job is to engage with these different audiences because, one, not because it's trying to be sort of a strategic marketing place. It actually has to come from a place of authenticity. And because I am interested in this stuff, I'm interested in all like the scary films. I realized that I had to go back. I really always like the ghost story ones. And I'm not a big slasher gore, camp gore, zombie gore, that kind of stuff. That's not my angle. I have much more interest in, these ghost stories. Like, for instance, there's a sci-fi show called Paranormal Witness, which is great. I really love that show. So the same vein, there's a lot of other people that want to share their ghost stories or something that happened to them. So the thing is, I just have to be involved in that community because, one, I really want to, because if I'm going to be doing this for a long term, I got to be authentic. I can't be like a marketing sleazy guy coming in and trying to figure out an angle how to sell to these people. I really literally have to give something of value to them and offer up something more than what they're experiencing in the community. And then as I build that up, that's what we're talking about. So if you can offer something to them for free that is valuable of what in the same mind space. So maybe it might be like, hey, I created this great PDF or book or something of like 25 best, places to find a ghost or hunt, in North America or what it might be, And so you can give away this free PDF guide, something that's in alignment with that audience that you want to meet with or talk to and engage with in exchange for an email address. And as you build your list, then there's a whole like how-to of properly addressing that email list, like sending out automatic response emails through like a service like MailChimp or Aweber, or you just email them on a consistent basis, furthering the conversation as long as you can offer great value. Now the cool thing is, if you're a filmmaker, the thing is, what I should be doing is I should be creating these small videos discussing, having more further topic discussion on the stuff that we are talking about in terms of the world of paranormal and ghosts, and then be seen as somebody who offers some fun stuff. And then say you do that for a couple months, and then you can at that point says, hey, I'm making this movie, like I'd love to get your thoughts on where I'm at with it. And so that's what they teach us, internet marketers, that the new way of doing things is you have to engage with that audience. If you built a strong email list, then you just have to start asking them questions, because the audience will kind of tell you like, I always hate when they make a ghost, like a scary movie, they always like cop out on this part of the movies, or here's my favorite scary movies and why. The whole point, you begin this discussion. So here are these notes. Now we're getting real specific, because this has nothing to do with filmmakers whatsoever. This has not, filmmakers have no idea that you're even doing this. You are there for a specific audience. Like I said, for me, I have to look at the paranormal ghost world and ghost stories and figure out how to engage with this audience and build a platform to have this engagement. I have not done this. This is, I know where I'm going. All I've done is building a list of the authorities or places that are very active, that already have built up a list, that have a built up following. I just have to figure out how I am going to be part of that community and offer them something of value. So knowing that when it gets to that point, I'll know whether or not the film idea that I'm working on or what I'm offering has any legs, or whether or not I've created any goodwill, and whether or not I've created any value to that audience across the board. And at that time, you're hoping that you can help out some of the more influential sort of bloggers and help out the more influential podcasters and so on that have a larger list that you can possibly work with. But you can see, as you build this real, authentic relationship with that community, because you have chosen it. And I think that's a big thing. Like, filmmakers need to make a decision of like what audiences they want to serve. And you have to be of service. You can't be a taker, which is what happens in the old way of doing things, which is like a creative person made something because they needed to get out there, and then they push it out to the world because they want the world to give them money for it. It's because they're pushing something onto an audience and they're wanting to take something back. And that relationship is beginning to dissolve, because the audiences they're much smarter, and they also have way too many options to have somebody pushing something on them and then expecting them to give. Hey, give to my crowdfunding, give this. It's all become noise. Audiences are going to engage with those who are offer really real value to them and who are authentic. And, because people know it now. They can smell through the bullshit, If somebody's not real, they know it. If somebody's not giving you true value, they know it. And so you as a filmmaker just have to make that decision, like, what audience do I want to hang out with for the next couple of years, or even longer for the rest of my life? Like, what group of people do I like to hang out with? And, like, how can I offer value? And then how can I make a really cool film for that audience specifically that's in alignment with our shared interest, And so that's really the goal, is you have to really look for it long term. And then the cool thing is, business-wise, it's like you said, your film you may give it away for free here and there just to give it, but you have to be strategic about it. In these last few Film Marketing Friday sessions that I've done, we got into a further discussion, more detailed discussion about selling on Amazon. And the concept there is that Amazon is a marketplace. And it's also a search engine. But the difference is that when people are on Google, they're looking for something for free. They're searching, but they're looking for something for free. When Amazon, people are searching, but they're in the mindset already. They want to buy something, because Amazon has always been that place that's, like eBay is, you're going to buy something. So the way independent authors are doing this is people are just writing their books. They are part of the Kindle program. They can easily upload and publish their book on a Kindle platform. And then the way to do it properly is you build a launch group. And I'm doing this right now with a survival guide book that I'm writing. I'm building a book launch group. So I need 100 people. The first 100 people, and I'll close it off at 100, will get the book for free. And all I'm asking is that when the book is launched on Amazon, is that they give an honest rating and review in Amazon. But can you imagine this? So your book comes out. You've already built this launch group, say for your film, and then you're going to say, I'm going to launch this onto Amazon, but you have 100 people that are going to get it for free, but the only thing they have to do in order to get it for free is get the honest rating and review. So you flood right out the gate when you launch your product onto the Amazon marketplace, you get 100 ratings and review. That's a lot. That's a weight in gold. That's magic, because then Amazon then sees that as like, oh, new hot up and coming, whatever, new noteworthy, like iTunes does. And then the Amazon search engine will take over, because they'll say like, like just you're buying something like, oh, I'm going to buy the latest, Marvel Avengers movie or whatever. And then down below it says, and other customers have also bought, they have a list and array of other things people have bought. So if you have done your homework and did your legwork of adding this launch of 100 ratings and review for your product right out the gate, the Amazon search engine will take that and start pairing it with other things of the same kind. So then somebody might be searching for what you're selling and see it, paired up correctly with a more hot selling item. And then on top of that, so then when you finally are going to sell it for real, then maybe for the first 2 weeks, you offer a discounted price. So say your movie or your book, you're going to, instead of selling it for $10, you're going to give it away for 99 cents or $5 or whatever it might be. But the way you do this is when you advertise and promote it online, your product, you want to make sure that not only you're giving it at a discounted price, because you're going to reward the early adopters. You're going to reward the people that are willing to, give you money up front. You got to make a deal that they can't, deny, and essentially you add more value to it. So not only will we get the film, or not only will we get the book, you're going to get the book plus an audio recording of the book so you can listen to it in the car. Or on top of that, you'll get this other book. It's like the whole infomercial thing. But wait, there's more. If you order right now, you'll get not only one, but two, but three, and we'll throw this in as well. So they try to make it like, guess what? We're going to make it the deal so sweet that you're going to buy into it. So then like the first week or two, you sell at a discount, but you have to add all this added value. So as a filmmaker, you got to figure out, like, I'm going to give my film out, but what other added value can I provide to that audience? Again, if I'm doing something for a paranormal ghost enthusiast, what are things that they would love to have? hey, not only will you buy my film for half the price, but I will throw in this EMF reader or whatever it might be, or here's a guide to ghost hunting in your region or something like that. Stuff that they just say, oh my God, you're going to throw all that in for half the price? I'm in. So you get that influx of sales right away, into that marketplace. And then the Amazon sort of search engine takes over. And so, and then you can sell it at full price. And then what happens is then you have some clout. So then you can go and start selling your product or your bundles at a full price and continue furthering the conversation, because now you've gained legitimacy. You can say, look, I'm number one seller on Amazon right now. Take a look at it. You can use that to your advantage to then sell it at a full price down the line on a long tail perspective. And then enjoy the ride. I think enjoy the ride, enjoy the community that you are engaging with. And then, they will probably tell you if they like your movie or not. And if what they want you to do next, or give you suggestions if you are willing to ask for it. But what happens then is you have an ability to build a lifelong fan base. And as long as you're in the mindset that you're there to serve them, not them to serve you, you'll be in a much healthier place. And then you utilize your talents as a filmmaker to give them cool things that they want. I think that's that's sort of the lesson coming full circle back to George Lucas, which is, he developed a gigantic fan base for Star Wars that he may have not taken the time to listen correctly before he created the last three movies, because there was so much backlash to it to some extent. So it's something to learn from on a small scale. Like, we are here to serve an audience, but you got to find out what your audience is, what community you want to hang out with. But there are business techniques that you can rinse and repeat over and over again. But now it's just numbers. Like you said, if you can do this and offer a product, if you offer a product worth $100, and that's it might be a film included with all these other things, all this other bundled stuff that you bundle together and say, to my audience, I give you this product that's worth $100. And if it's in alignment with the price and value, your customers, your fan base, they're not going to blink. You're like, oh, no problem. I'll give you 3 payments of whatever, $33 or whatever it might be. It's that's a no-brainer, because what you give to me, that's the price you're asking for. No big deal. But then you realize it's just numbers. So say you get 1,000 people to do that, then you're going to make 100,000 per year that allow you to continue to do what you need to do to serve them. And then just look at what happens if you do really well. Say you have 10,000 people that are willing to give you $100 a year. Now you can just do the math. Now that's ridiculous. Now that's ridiculous money to allow you to make a living. And the funny thing is that you were never really part of the sort of independent film media, because their incentive, some people working at all these different publications or blog sites, they're chasing the stars. They're chasing sort of what's Hollywood doing and what's that other independent film world doing. And, that incentive for an author is there's more fun and more reward for them to get a great interview with somebody famous than it is for somebody they don't know about that's just quietly making a living, making these films for their audience. So I think there's going to be a major shift where you're going to have some of these independent artists able to just serve their audience. And then the fame and sort of the press that comes with it may come later down the line, but it doesn't matter. They're quietly making a living and serving their audience correctly, and not chasing sort of this sort of, I don't know, say this false sort of celebrity fame money thing. And that's sort of my opinion of it. And that's sort of where I'm comfortable knowing, hey, I know that I can make products, a feature film for so inexpensive. I just got to get better at it. I got to supersize that effort. I don't necessarily feel like I need to go bigger budget. I just need to get better at making something that small to really work on, the gameplay. In the video game world, remember, it was all about the gameplay. Mm-hmm. Well, in the film world, it's all about this little story. So I got to get better at honing my craft and at working at a small level. And then, but on top of that, on a business side of things, I know I have to get better at serving an audience that I'm going to choose that is not filmmakers, that it's a very specific, audience that has a specific need, and somebody who I want to hang out with and talk to and see if I can utilize my talents to give them something of value. And that's really the bottom line. I think that's sort of the future we're going. And hopefully there was some good tips and techniques as people begin to think about where they go with their filmmaking career. I think a lot of it because I'm older now, so I don't have any aspirations to be, famous or work in that world. Like if it comes, that's amazing. But you always have your base. And I think that's what's really exciting about all this is like you said, like no matter what, like I'm not worried about whether or not I'm not going to have a crew or not. That's cool. I'm not worried about whether or not I have all the money in the world to make a film anymore. That's cool because I've already done it. I'm not worried about whether or not I'm going to get the best distribution deal. That's cool because I'm not worried about it because I've built an authentic, real audience that I can connect with on a one-on-one basis. So all that other stuff that we follow that was been traditional of like the Hollywood studio system or the pseudo independent film world system, if they come knocking your door because they see that you built up a following and that you're making a living without them, they have to come to you and have to make sure that they're providing value, that they're going to add something more to the experience. Otherwise, you just be selling out all your license rights to the product that you created to them, and they're going to exploit it, the way they want to see it without your involvement. And so I think that's the change. And I'm excited to see, more filmmakers are going to be able to do that. And really it's going to happen. Some filmmaker somewhere is going to make a tiny little film, sell it directly online to an audience, and make like over $1 million. And it's like we've seen it happen with the iPhone app world where a programmer made a fart app and sold millions of copies of it. You know what I mean? We're at that place where a filmmaker can totally do it. And once that happens, then the press will shift their heads and the entire industry will look over and go, oh, we'll use that as an example. Because if you notice, the press always seems to like hang on to those outliers that were able to do it on an unusual way. We still reference, Kevin Smith as somebody who did something for 25 grand and made Clerks and, made his film. Robert Rodriguez is still famous for his $7,000 El Mariachi. Paranormal Activity, but you look at it, or Napoleon Dynamite, there's all these independent films that we still hold on to as lore, because with every one of those that happen in the world, that's just enough of a carrot, enough of a hope that we kind of cling on to that it's possible. It's that whole Dumb and Dumber where Jim Carrey's like, so you're telling me there's a chance, it's like the slim, less than 1% chance that still could happen. And that's what, but we never hear about all that, 99% of all the other ones that don't happen. So, but I believe that this way, there's a much more predictable, tangible, logical way of making a living, because it really will come down to whether or not your shit's any good, Yeah. Whether or not whatever you make, you can't blame the system anymore. Like you're getting screwed because a gatekeeper had a beef against you, and that's why you're not able to be successful. That doesn't exist anymore. Now it's just like straight up like, guess what? If that audience that you're serving says your stuff is shit, then it's shit, It's like it comes down to like you have got to make something great for that audience and serve them the best you can. And I think that's a better place to be than trying to serve a few gatekeepers, and kiss an ass for a couple different gatekeepers. Because what happens in that world of independent film, everybody works off fees. The idea is like you make a film for like $10 million. The whole point is you don't care whether or not that film is successful or not out in the marketplace. The independent film world is like a producer is saying like, I just need to make this film for $10 million. I need to make sure it gets sold and get my money back at $10 million, because in that line item of the budget, I'm going to make $300,000 or I'm going to make $1.2 million because that's my fee in this whole line budget, you know, because that's how the operation's been working for so many years. Is like, you're wondering, like, how do people make a living in all these different films, you know, because they've just been selling it to the foreign markets that are willing to give them a promise note of saying, I will pay you $5 million in foreign pre-sales. I will pay you $10 million in pre-sales. As long as the producer makes it for under that or just about that, and they can, you know, get that budget paid for in that line item, everybody gets their fee. And the film may never even see the day of light. And the film may never even have any impact on any audience, you know, but it doesn't matter because you're collecting like $800,000 of $1.2 million for, you know, producing shit films that nobody ever sees. It doesn't matter because you have figured out the system of working in that world where different film buyers will pay you based off what they believe is like, hey, great, you got that actress, that actor in that action film. You know, you'll be surprised. A lot of the people at AFM never even look at the film. They look at the trailer, they look at your poster, and they say, oh yeah, I could totally sell this. I'll give you, you know, $5 million for this. That's it. There's no incentive to see whether the film is any good and the producer selling it doesn't care. They're selling out because they just need to get that money so they can get their fee. They need to get paid. Where the difference now, the independent film world, the micro budget film, the backpack filmmaker or whatever it might be you want to call it, the backyard filmmaker, they've got to commit themselves to the audience. And the audience is going to either reward them and they're going to serve that audience correctly or not. I mean, now it's like no bullshit anymore. It's like their stuff has got to be good or it dies. So that's my rant, my friend. I can't believe I have been babbling for almost 2 hours for you. I am so sorry if it's gone too long. If I lost, you might have to break this up in 2 parts. I don't know.
No, I'm just gonna put it up. Oh, believe me, we've had some go over 2 hours. And the funny thing is, Scott, we didn't record any of this, so we got to start all over again.
Oh, good. I can do much more condensed then.
But you know, in closing, have you ever seen or heard of the movie Colin?
Colin?
Yes.
I don't think I have. Tell me more.
It's a zombie film that was shot for 35 pounds because it was British. And basically the only costs were like a couple of, you know, what they call biscuits, which we would call cookies, on set, and a few little things here and there. But after all was said and done, it was about like 35 pounds. And he shot it all on a mini DV cam. He shot it wherever he could. He took it to the Cannes Film Festival, and some reporter was talking to him, and they said, "How much did your movie cost?" Again, like you said, how much did your movie cost? And you know,
yeah.
So he said 35 pounds, and they said, "What? Well, is it good?" And word spread that, hey, it's good because the movie is all about a guy who gets bit, and he becomes a zombie at the beginning of the film, and the whole film is him shambling through zombie-filled England and just running into different people. Different bands of survivors find him, and it tracks him all the way through, and it actually did pretty well. And, you know, but he actually found it, obviously a distributor saw that and was like, okay, we're going to buy this immediately. He didn't self-distribute it or anything like that, but he could have if he wanted to, because it was about in 2000, I want to say 2009 it came out. But if you get a chance, check that movie out.
Oh, awesome. I love it. Yeah, that's great, too, because, like, you know, no sweat off his back. You get a lot of sweat equity. You know, probably I could see the premise totally working. One of my favorite zombie films was 28 Days Later, you know, a Boyle's film. Fantastic. You know, that totally opened the floodgates of like, oh, my God, look what you do with a DV camera. So it's like, but yeah, like you said, there are going to be more stories like that. But when an independent artist has like a strong audience that they're communicating on a regular basis, you know, they can make that decision whether or not going with a distribution company is of any value to them, you know, because I think the distribution companies are going to have to change, and they're going to have to be, they're going to have to bring to the table, like, we have access to this many more fan bases or whatever it might be, and this is how we do our marketing to them, and we'd love to represent you. And represent the film, you know, if here's our terms of agreement or whatever it might be. That I can see changing. I think that's what needs to change in the independent film space is the distribution companies need to, the old way of doing things Yeah, it just needs to change. But awesome. Man, thank you so much for letting me talk shop. I don't know if I get a lot of, I get it in bursts, but this was not definitely planned. It was just me rambling. But a lot of stuff has been on my brain for so long. I'm just excited to share it. And hopefully, I really hope people get value out of this. And I hope people hung through the entire thing, or, break it up in parts or whatever it is. I definitely didn't want to bore people. I was hoping it'd be informative.
Well, I learned a lot, and I'm sure somebody out there has too. Because you touched on a lot of good stuff, Scott. And obviously, I'm glad you were able to use this as an outlet, because you made a lot of very good points. And I was glad I was able to extract that from you. But everyone, make sure you check out Scott at filmtrooper.com. And again, he has a free filmmaking guide. It's freefilmmakingguide.com. That's correct, right?
No, it's actually even simpler than that. So if you want to get on the email list, I give you a free gift. It's called freegearguide.com. And it's just an equipment list of everything I use to make the feature film, The Cube. And you can see what I use when you don't have a crew, but how very minimalistic that you could get away with it. So again, that's freegearguide.com.
Cool.
Thanks,
and Scott, you're on Twitter too, right?
Oh, I am, at Film Trooper. I changed my Twitter handle. For the longest time I had it was like at Scott_Erwin, but I realized that it was such a long Twitter handle that I was just changed it to Film Trooper, since that was becoming more prevalent, that was associated with me. So I'm like, okay, that Film Trooper sounds good.
Cool. Excellent. And everyone, you can find me always at DaveBullis.com. On Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. And feel free to sign up for my email list too. I actually am just basically, you just get a message about this podcast maybe once a month at most, and a few other little articles I found, and I'm always ever expanding that, so slowly growing that. But and everyone tune in next week. We'll be continuing this. It was all about making your first movie, making your movie, whatever, however you want to phrase it. But Scott, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for hanging out with me for almost 2 hours. Hey, first of all, wait, how do we get onto your newsletter? Wait, what's the address?
It's actually a link right on the homepage of DaveBullis.com.
Okay, good. There you go. The link on DaveBullis.com.
Yeah, there's a little box in the right-hand corner there. Just sign up for my newsletter.
You need to offer a free belly rub or something. No, I was kidding.
It's funny. I'm actually redoing my website right now. I'm actually getting some pieces together, and I'm going to launch a complete redesign. I'm actually switching hosts and everything.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually been playing this for a long while. But I'm just not quite 100% happy with the I'm very limited in what I can do right now, and I want to be just completely free to do whatever I want to. So, but yeah, I'm going to end up offering something for free at some point. I don't know what it would be. I have some ideas, but who knows?
Nice.
That belly rub's not a bad idea, though.
That's the crap that I would offer. Hey, sign up, you get this, and I'll give you a free belly rub. Then they might take me up on the offer.
I actually am. I'm redesigning shirts for my production company, Iron Fist Films. Mm-hmm. I'm actually thinking about giving away 100 free shirts.
There you go.
The first 100 people that actually sign up are going to get the shirts.
I love that. Great. Yeah, it's worth a lot for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
So, but I'll make sure to get one for you too, Scott, if you want one.
Well, I'll sign up for it. I'll be on your email list.
Cool.
Now I am.
Awesome. But thanks again, Scott, and I wish you the best. And again, if you ever need anything for your future productions, let me know.
Yeah, definitely, guys. And again, anybody who's stuck around this long, you are a trooper. I do hope you get or just hit me up. Hit me up on Twitter. It's awesome. I have people just talking to me all the time. I love it. It's awesome to get this good vibe, and it's been an amazing year so far. I hope to see it grow even further, and I hope I can create a good film for the audience that I'm going to be serving. And I kind of like that idea where it comes down to you guys now. Anything you do, you just got to make something good. And it sounds easier said than done, but make it good for that audience and serve them well.
Cool. Thanks again, Scott.
All right, everybody. Thanks.
Take care. Man.
Bye.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.